freedom is the answer, bringing people together. I feel so emphatically positive about the benefits of liberty, because it's only the free society that cares about people. And that is what we have to convince people of. And the magnificent thing about a free society, it's not judgmental. Yes, on a personal basis, you can judge your own life, your life of your kids and your family, and you may be judgmental in the sense that you know what right and wrong, but it's not judgmental in the sense that we want to write laws and decide how you should spend your money and what you should eat and whether or not you can drink raw milk or not. We shouldn't do that. But in many ways, we've lost confidence in freedom in general, and we've lost confidence in an understanding of how free markets work. And we've been always talked into saying, well, there's always going to be people that will need help, and therefore we have to help them or they'll fall through the cracks. When you do it their way, the way the Keynesians have done it, the cracks get bigger and more people fall through them. You know, and we always get charged with saying, well, if you don't help those kind of people, then you don't care. You have no humanitarian concerns. But I've come to the conclusion that if we do have humanitarian concerns, which I have, and I'm sure you do, the best way to take care of human needs is to have a free society and free markets and sound money. That will take care of the maximum number of people. The country is waking up due to all the evidence that we see. The political landscape is changing. They're desperately struggling for that one single candidate that will capture all of America, can represent the status quo. But it doesn't look like they're finding one very easy, which opens up the door for us. I really believe that. And there's a good reason why the Tea Party movement arose. And it isn't so much that we know who's in the Tea Party and exactly what the beliefs are. There's no one Tea Party movement. There was a necessity for a group of people to stand up and tell it the way it is and speak out against this party system that we have. We don't have a two-party system. We have a single-party system. Just think of how much doesn't change regardless of which party. Does medical care programs change with Republicans versus the Democrats? Does monetary policy change? Does the entitlement system change? Does foreign policy change? No, they endorse the same ideas. They've been taught by the same people. But what's happening in the country now is this standing up. I am always annoyed by the fact that we know what one of the excuses has been for us to go overseas, which I just don't, I just think it's a real stretch of their imagination. We're overseas to spread our goodness and spread democracy. At the point of a gun? We know and understand what liberty means, and we know that it means personal liberty. We know it means a different foreign policy, and we know it means a different monetary policy, and certainly it means a different economic policy. And we take the oath of office very seriously. And the odds of us leaving Iraq, what do you think the odds are of leaving Iraq? I think they're slim to none. Until we're broke, unless we get somebody in office that will change the foreign policy and bring the troops home. Now, the one thing a president can do without congressional authority is he shouldn't go to war without this Congress approval and have a declaration. But one thing he can do, a president can do, and I would do, is I can end the wars that are undeclared and unconstitutional. I had one member of Congress sitting beside him, and we were voting on something that was protecting the consumer or doing something. I said, why do you have to do this? You know, why do you feel compelled to vote for this? He said, well, the people are too stupid to take care of themselves. Those were the words he used, and that's the attitude they have, and they believe that. We can't argue that there will be no problems in a free society. It's just that they would be minimized, and there would be a lot more wealth in the country. And there would be a lot more charity in the country. We've spent over $1 trillion on the war on drugs. We haven't gotten rid of the drugs, but we've gotten rid of our liberties. People have these SWAT teams going into the wrong houses and killing people. But it's time we recognize that it's your life. Yes, if you want to do something dumb, you're allowed to do it in a free society, but you can't go and beg other people or require the government to take care of you do dumb things. One thing that's always been hard for me to understand is our country is still pretty good in protecting religious freedom. I think there's less tolerance than there used to be because there's some phobias around on this. But basically, most Americans say, yes, you have a right of no religion or any religion, and that seems to be fine. We protect intellectual freedoms as well, pretty well. But when it comes to your own body and making your own decisions about what foods you eat and what you drink and what you smoke and what you do in your personal habits, all of a sudden, there's a bunch up there, liberals and conservatives, say, well, the people are too dumb to protect themselves. They're always going to do harm to themselves, and we know what's best for them, and we will take care of them. So that is insidious in the culture, and there's this belief that you need some nanny state to take care of us. But once again, it isn't an argument that it's a perfect society. But the society that I don't want is when the government controls us, whether it's financial control or personal control or religious control or control by forcing us into these wars. That's what we don't need. We need to stand up and demand our freedoms. Nobody will forget where they were on 9/11. That's 10 years ago. Those were difficult times, especially for those of us who were trying to explain exactly what 9/11 was all about. But immediately afterwards, there was a fair amount of legislation that came up. The first bill that came to the floor to rectify these problems that existed wasn't to address foreign policy or exactly asking questions, why do people commit suicide terrorism? Where did these people actually come? Certainly wasn't Iraq. They didn't ask that. They said, what we need to do is pass the Patriot Act, which makes no sense. I talked to one member of Congress when we voted on it. I says, why are you voting for this? You haven't even had a chance to read it, and it has some terrible stuff in there. He says, how can I not vote for the Patriot Act under these circumstances? How could I go home and explain it? I says, well, that's what your job is. At the universities, young people a lot of times represent any significant change. And if we had no young people and if the campuses were dead and totally uninterested in what we were doing, I would be very discouraged. And yet today, this is the place where we get a lot of attention. Yes, we have terrible problems. Yes, they've undermined our liberties. But we still have some left. We're still in this room. We still have the opportunity to elect different people in Washington. Right now, we have a tremendous opportunity, because the evidence is crystal clear that the views of the last century almost, at least 80 years on foreign policy and monetary policy, the evidence is in. They have failed. And our views are now appropriate to be put in place. And we must remember that armies can't stop an idea whose time has come. And I believe our ideas, our time has come. They're always saying and charging us with this not caring. But if you sacrifice a little bit of liberty, let's say that you do say, well, we have to help those in need. The reason I think that is wrong is because, first, it's not morally right to steal from one group to give it to another, regardless of what their needs are. Economically, it doesn't work, and it fails. It's not constitutionally authorized. But when you help a little bit, a few people, you've sacrificed 100% of the principle. You've endorsed redistribution of wealth, and we're bound to grow. That's sort of like saying, the income tax is not so bad if it's 1%, like it started out. But 1% has endorsed the principle that the government says they own all your income and they'll allow you to keep a certain percentage according to their dictates. That's why the income tax is the worst type of tax on a free society. What we should have been doing in 2008 is when the crisis comes and somebody's bankrupt, you have stricter regulations, not weaker regulations, and the strict regulations say, you've messed up, you go bankrupt and wipe that debt off the books. You don't go to the people. So there's reason to be very concerned. I am talking about and believe sincerely, although I do not claim to be a prognosticator and claim that I know when things would happen. I think good economic thinking tells you that printing money, your dollar loses value and a few things like that. But I think things are going to be much worse next summer. I think the dollar is in a crisis. I think that's what the price of gold is telling us. And it's pervasive. It's around the world. It's the biggest bubble ever. All other countries use dollars in their reserves. So this is not going to be one country. It's not going to be just Greece. It's not going to be just the United States. Everybody has to face up to this. And this is why people are rushing into something that they can fully trust. Even putting money in the bank doesn't help anymore because they're talking about charging you to put your money in the bank. There's a lot of paper money and money floating around, but nobody has any confidence. And this is a sign that something big is coming on. This week, we saw that the consumer price index was going up at 0.5%, which means it's going up 0.1%. It's going up twice as fast as the government tells you. The housing sales are continuing once again to go down. But interestingly enough, if you look at the prices of houses in the last 3 months, they've been creeping up. That means that all things of real value eventually there will be a need for those things, and I think that is what's happening. We have this opportunity to use all these issues because the world is changing, the attitudes are changing, the understanding is changing. There's a lot of room to be very optimistic about our opportunities. But I'm convinced that it brings people together. I'm convinced that this philosophy brings together those who claim they're progressives and those who consider themselves moderates and those who consider them conservatives and libertarians, because they all have bits and pieces of the freedom ideas. And there's no reason why we can't work with people on those issues in which we agree. This is a way that people feel less threatened and will come together. And I claim that I have worked as well with any other group in Washington as anybody, instead of being stereotyped and say I'm a right-wing conservative and I don't talk to others on the progressive side. Because you get a lot of support from progressives who are sick and tired of Obama's constant wars and his attack on civil liberties. In a history of freedom, it's a rather young philosophy. Authoritarianism is how the world has lived most of all history. And that is people wanting to run other people's lives, having dictators and czars and kings and all these authoritarians that want to tell us what to do. We did have a good start. We didn't have a perfect constitution, a lot of shortcomings there, but it was good compared to others. And it introduced us into an age where we recognize private properties and sound money and contracts and self-reliance and not a welfare state and not a world empire. So we had this test and we became the most prosperous nation in the history of the world. We're still very wealthy. But our problem is we destroyed our production. We got careless about understanding what liberty was all about. And now our prosperity is very, very fragile because we've destroyed the foundation. And it's not going to take a whole lot to push the whole house down because the foundation is gone. We need to restore the principles of liberty. When we became prosperous, people became infatuated with the materialism and thought, well, materialism is wonderful, it's perpetual, and all we need is a government to help redistribute it. And we forgot all about defending the principles that produce the wealth. But now we are being pushed. And if we think that we can do this by spending and deficits and printing money and not address the subject of repairing the foundation, we're kidding ourselves. We have this opportunity. We have the people now coming with us. And right now the evidence is so clear that it is failing. Government is failing around the world. The only question is, what is it going to be replaced with? Are we going to go backwards and get dictatorial powers, or are we going to continue the process that we had a taste of and we've allowed to be slipping away from us? Can we restore that and get the people encouraged enough to say, let's use the remaining freedoms we have to defend our liberties and promote this great country of ours once again? Thank you very much.